ID and clearance lights. There are a total of 5 lights. The 3 in the middle represent commercial vehicle. The 2 at the edges, they represents the height and the width of the vehicle. Tractor has them, trailer has them. Okay, these lights are all securely fastened. They're clean, not cracked, loose, broken, chipped, or missing. Okay, the lens must be in good condition, no discoloration or oxidation. They do turn on, they do turn off. They're amber color, working properly. Next is these lights. They're called headlights. I'm going to be checking the low beam, high beam, left right signal, 4-way flashers. These lights are securely fastened. They're clean, not cracked, loose, broken, or missing. They're not chipped. The lens must be in good condition, no discoloration, not oxidated. This is conventional color. The left right signal and 4-way flashes, they're amber color. All the other ones are proper color. They all turn on, they all turn off. They are working properly. Next, I'm going to be checking underneath the tractor. Okay, I'm listening for any air leaks, any hissing noise, if I can hear any. I'm also checking in for any fluid leakage. Okay, such as it could be an engine oil leak, could be power steering, could be radiator, anything of that nature. I'm also looking for any hanging wires. It could be hoses, it could be electric wires, it could be loose fuel lines, anything that's hanging. I'm going to be checking to make sure nothing's hanging. Okay, next, if you want to, you don't have to, you can say the grill is securely fastened. Just make sure it's free of debris for ventilation, it's not cracked or broken. Next is the bumper is securely bolted tight. Make sure it's not loose, it's not cracked or broken, it's not hanging. That's pretty much it for the front of the tractor. Okay, next, moving on to the starting with the reservoir. Some people call it a bottle. That's fine. This reservoir is for the radiator, right? The reservoir is securely bolted tight. It is not cracked or leaking. Hoses are not cracked or leaking, securely clamped. Okay, this is the cap. The cap is secured. It is not cracked or leaking. And the cap has an inner rubber seal. It prevents fluid from leaking. Just make sure it's not cut, ripped, or excessively worn. Fluid must be at proper level. If it's low, obviously you pour it in from there, but not when the engine is hot. You have to wait till it cools off. Okay, next, moving on to the alternator. This is the alternator. It is belt driven. The alternator is securely bolted tight. It is not cracked or broken. Electric wires back here are securely fastened and not frayed, and they are properly sealed. I'm also checking to make sure that it's properly charging the batteries on the other side, and it is working properly. Okay, this is a belt, also known as serpentine belt, some people call it. It is not cut, it is not by the way, this is belt driven. It is not cut, ripped, or excessively worn. It's not frayed. This belt cannot be too tight. The deflection or play is no more than 3/4 of an inch. Okay, moving on to the water pump. The water pump is securely bolted tight. It is not cracked or leaking. Hoses are not cracked or leaking. They're securely clamped on all ends. It is also belt driven, and it is properly circulating coolant. Okay, so both of those are belt driven. Moving on to the next side. This is a reservoir. Some call it a bottle. This is called a power steering reservoir. It says right there on the cap. Okay, power steering reservoir, same thing you said back there, you're going to say for this. It is securely bolted tight. It is not cracked or leaking. Hoses are not cracked or leaking, securely clamped. Okay, fluid must be at proper level. The cap must be tight and it's not cracked or leaking. Again, if you open the cap, it has an inner rubber seal. Just make sure it's not cut or ripped because it prevents fluid from leaking. Okay, and if you want to add, it's very simple. You test it from here and you open it and you add more fluid in there. Moving on to the oil dipstick line. Oil dipstick line is securely connected. It is not bent, cracked, or broken. The oil dipstick must be secured in place. Okay, that's why they have a lock. If you look over here, they have a lock on two ends, both ends. Just make sure it's secured in place, otherwise oil can come out and leak. And the way you check the oil, this is conventional, like your own car. You just open it. It has a minimum, maximum. Make sure it's at proper level. How do you add oil? Like any other car, engine block. has a cap right there. You just add oil, the proper oil according to manufacturer, obviously. You just add it, you put the dipstick line back in place. Next, you have the air compressor and air governor. The air compressor is in the back of the tractor. The air governor we're able to see, okay? The air compressor is securely bolted tight. It is not cracked or leaking. Hoses are not cracked or leaking or pinched or dry rotted. The fittings are securely connected for the hoses, which is behind this tractor. Air governor is back here. Air governor is securely bolted tight. Air governor is here, is securely bolted tight. It is not cracked or leaking. Hoses are not cracked or leaking, pinched or dry rotted. Fittings and securely connected. Air governor has two lines. One is for service, the other one is for emergency line, and it is working properly. Okay. Next, moving on to the steering system, steering wheel system. The steering wheel system starts from here, the shaft, steering wheel shaft. Next, you got the rubber boot, U-joints, the gearbox, pitman arm, drag link. There's a steering arm, upper, lower, and tie rod. All of those are known as steering wheel system. According to California DMV commercial handbook, the driver, before taking off, must move all these parts to see if they're loose. And if they are loose, then the vehicle is out of order. You cannot continue driving because you'll have steering problem. Starting with the steering wheel shaft, it is securely mounted, not bent, cracked, or broken. No illegal welding or drilling. This is the boot, rubber boot. Rubber boot is securely clamped. It is not cut out or ruptured. It's in good condition. These are called U-joints. U-joints on both ends, securely connected, not bent, cracked, or worn, free of debris, properly lubricated. This is a gearbox, steering gearbox. It is securely bolted tight, as you can see, to the tractor frame. It is not cracked or leaking. Hoses are not cracked or leaking. They're securely clamped on both ends, and then fittings are securely connected as well. Next, you have, make sure nuts and bolts are not loose. Next, you have the pitman arm. Pitman arm is securely bolted tight, not bent, cracked, or worn. Castle nut cotter pin secured in place. No illegal weld or drilling allowed. There's bushings. The bushing, make sure it's not excessively worn, cut, or ripped. Next is all of the following items are referred to as steering linkage, which is drag link, steering arm, upper, lower, and tie rod, which is in the back. All of those are same. You're supposed to make sure that it's securely bolted tight. It is not bent, cracked, or broken. No illegal welding allowed. There's castle nut cotter pins secured in place. There's also bushings between all the metals, just to make sure it's not cut, ripped, or excessively worn. That completes the steering system. Moving on to the suspension system. Suspension system includes spring mount, includes spring leaves, includes U-bolts, includes the axle, steering axle, includes the shock absorber. Starting with the spring mount. Spring mount is securely bolted tight to the tractor frame, not bent, cracked, or worn. No missing bolts, bushing, or bracket. There's a rubber bushing. Make sure, again, it's not excessively worn, it's not cut or ripped. Moving on to the spring leaves. Spring leaves are securely mounted, not bent, cracked, or shifted, or some say swings. That's okay too. Securely mounted, not bent, cracked, or shifted. Then you got U-bolts. U-bolts are securely bolted tight to the steering axle, holding all the spring leaves together in line. U-bolts are not cracked, loose, broken, or missing. Okay. There's bushing between U-bolts and spring leaves. Make sure, again, it's not cracked, excessively worn, it's in good condition. Moving on to the axle. That's called the steering axle. Steering axle is securely mounted. It is not bent, cracked, or broken. No illegal weld or drilling allowed. Next is the shock absorbent. The shock absorbent are securely mounted to the tractor frame. They're not cracked or leaking. Bushings on both ends are in good condition. They're not ripped or excessively worn. That is the steering suspension system. Moving on to the brake system. The brake system, before I begin, I'm going to be listening for any brake leaks or hissing noise, because this is where air travels, just to make sure it's not leaking. Okay. Now, the items include the hoses. Brake hose includes the brake chamber, push rod, slack adjuster, brake drums and brake shoes, which are inside of the tire. Starting with the hose. The hose is not cracked, leaking, it is not pinched, and it's not dry rotted. Fittings and joints are securely connected on both ends. Brake chamber securely bolted tight, not cracked, dented, or leaking. No loose or missing. Clamps. Moving on to push rod. Push rod is securely bolted tight. It is not cracked or worn. The play is no more than 1 inch when pulled by hand. The way you check the play is by chalking your wheels. There's rubber material you put in front of the wheel and the back of the wheel. Make sure it's not rocking back and forth. Also make sure no one's touching the service brake. That's how you check you pull on the push rod. Next is the slack adjuster. Slack adjuster is securely bolted tight. No cracks, no breaks. Must be at 90 degrees towards push rod. Slack adjuster has a cotter pin. Make sure that is present. That's what's holding it. Also, there is a screw on the slack adjuster which mechanic uses it to adjust the push rod. Moving on to the brake drums. Brake drums are securely bolted tight. They're not cracked or dented. No discoloration, no loose or missing nuts and bolts. There cannot be any dirt, oil, grease, water, liquid of any kind. Moving on to the brake shoes. Brake shoes are securely bolted tight. They're not cracked or broken. The wear is no less than 1/4 of an inch. I'm also going to be looking for dark dust or white dust. If I see dark dust, it means overheating of the shoe pads. If I see white dust, means fire extinguisher has been used. That is the brake system. Moving on to the tires. Tires, these are steering system tires. I'm also listening for any air leaks because air is in here, they can leak as well. I'm checking for ICD, inflation, condition, and depth. The steering tires must be factory direct only. These tires cannot be recapped. These tires cannot be recapped. They cannot be regrooved. They cannot be retreaded. Okay. The tire treads must be evenly worn all the way around the tire. No cracks, no cuts, no nails. The tire tread depth must be no less than 4/32 of an inch. The sidewalls or inflation, no cuts, no cracks, no bubbles. Inflation according to manufacturer specification. Using a tire air gauge. Each tire, each company manufacturer is different. This, I believe, is from 90 to 105. Moving on to the rim. The rim is securely bolted tight. No cracks, not bent. No illegal welding or drilling allowed. I'm looking for the edges of the rim. It's very important that they are straight because air can leak from here as well. So ours is completely straight. I'm listening for any air leaks, any hissing noise, and it's in good condition. Moving on to the lug nuts and bolts. None are cracked, loose, broken, or missing. No shiny threads or rust, otherwise they indicate they are loose. Air valve stem. Air valve stem is securely connected, not bent, cracked, or broken. I cannot touch any part of the rim, and the cap must be secured, and it is present because air can leak from there as well. Hub oil seal. It is securely bolted tight. It is not cracked or leaking. The fluid and oil must be in proper level. No loose or missing nuts and bolts. There's a screw that you can open, or driver can open, or mechanic, and they can add oil in there. This is called a hub oil seal. This covers the tires for the steering tire. Next is the coupling system. This is called the coupling system, which all forms A, B, C, D, you must do the coupling system in all forms. Starting with the glad hands, okay? Glad hands are securely bolted tight, no cracks, no breaks. The inner rubber seal is intact, not cut or not ripped, otherwise air can leak from here, okay? Moving on to the lines. You have the blue line, service, and you have the emergency line. These lines are not cracked, leaking, pinched, or tangled, okay? These lines are tight, secured on both ends. Fittings are securely connected. Moving on to the electric line. Electric line is properly sealed. It's not cut, no exposed wires anywhere on the electric line. It's secured on both ends, okay? And the way you secure it, obviously there's needles. Make sure it's tightly in there. And there's a door that prevents liquid or rain or moist to go inside. So make sure this door is also operational and present, okay? And they're connected on both ends. All lines are properly suspended. They're properly suspended to avoid contacts with any moving parts, okay? All lines are properly suspended to avoid contacts with any moving parts. Moving on to the platform. The platform is securely bolted tight to the tractor frame. No cracks, no holes, no broken wheels, no missing nuts and bolts. Moving on to the fifth wheel. Fifth wheel is securely bolted tight to the tractor frame. It's not bent, cracked, or broken. No illegal weld allowed anywhere. Fifth wheel also has drop pin and cotter pin on both sides, left and driver and passenger side. Make sure they're both present. Moving on to the release arm. Release arm is securely bolted tight. It is not bent, cracked, or broken. It is fully engaged. Safety latch secured. It is not it's securely bolted tight. It is not bent, cracked, or broken. There's a spring. That spring, make sure it's not excessively worn in the back, otherwise it could obstruct the operation. Moving on to the platform. The platform is securely bolted tight, not bent, cracked, or broken. No illegal weld or drilling allowed. No gap between platform and trailer apron. The trailer apron is completely straight. It's not bent. It is welded to the trailer frame. Okay. Trailer apron is completely straight, not bent, cracked, and it is welded to the trailer frame. And the platform is properly lubricated to avoid friction with trailer apron. There's two more items for the coupling system. The items include locking jaws and kingpin. The locking jaws securely bolted tight, not bent, cracked, loose, missing, or broken. They properly locked around the kingpin shaft. The kingpin is that round metal. It is present. It is not bent. It is not loose. It is not cracked. It is not broken. It must be properly lubricated, and it is working properly. That completes the coupling system. That's it.
We're fine.
You want to do this? Okay, stop it because that's